Hello, my name's Jeff Mann. Uh, it's no secret that right now our country is going through a really difficult time, and people have some very strong opinions, and we're battling each other, and it's really a problem. And a lot of us are trying to figure out how do we get through this, and how do we get through this, and actually improve as a result of that. And how do we prepare ourselves to deal next time with difficult situations that may arise? So, what if Martin Luther had the cure for our racial and political strife? So, first of all, I'm talking about Martin Luther, not this guy, not Martin Luther King Jr., but this guy, Martin Luther, the 16th century German reformer. Now, if you know anything about Martin Luther, this might actually seem counterintuitive that Martin Luther would have the cure for our racial and political strife. Two of the things that Luther is criticized for most vehemently is the things that he said about the Jews, which were absolutely terrible and indefensible, and then also the way that he handled the peasant rebellions. And people disagree about that second one a little bit more, but he clearly was not the model that we would look for in resolving political tensions. But I don't think we need to look at Luther's example, but rather Luther's ideas and teachings, because unfortunately Luther didn't always follow his own counsel, but a lot of times his counsel itself was actually rock solid, and he gives us really good advice. And specifically what I want to look at today is his very short comments in his small catechism on the eighth commandment. And in the eighth commandment, in his catechism, this is what he says. The commandment itself says, "You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor." And so he asks, what does this mean? He says, we should fear and love God so that we do not lie about, betray, or slander our neighbor, but excuse him, speak well of him, and put the best construction on everything. And it's that last phrase there at the bottom, and put the best construction on everything, that has been something that has stuck with me for many years and is a model of, I think, how we should conduct ourselves much more often. I don't do this very well. I know many of you don't do this very well, but that's the idea, I think, of putting the best construction on everything that we need to try to figure out how do we insert that into our society, how do we insert that into our own behavior. So the first thing we have to point out is Luther is not asking you to be naive. He's not asking you to be overly optimistic. He doesn't want you to be a sucker, right? He doesn't want you to allow people to take advantage of you so you're stupid, right? That's not his point at all. What he's asking you to do is to slow your roll. What he's asking you to do is not assume the worst about others. Give others the benefit of the doubt. And so we have this tendency to do exactly the opposite. We have a tendency to want to assume the worst about others, and we need to put the brakes on that, because that's very often what prevents us from making progress and what tears us apart as a world, as a society, and even in a community, even in our family, right? It's this tendency that we have to be aware of. And lately, I'd say for about the last year or so, I've been thinking about tribalism and our innate tendency towards tribalism. And I believe this is built into our DNA, that we have this penchant for tribalism. And tribalism can take a lot of different forms. It can take the form of ethnicity, it can take the form of race, religion, nationality, social class, profession, and politics. Oh yeah, absolutely. We are tremendously divided and tribalistic when it comes to our politics. Are you on the good side or are you on the bad side? We figure that out about people pretty quickly when we meet them and decide how we want to interact with them and if we want to interact with them. And our tribalist nature expresses itself in a lot of ways, but we're seeing it a lot these days with regard to politics. And so tribalism is what drives us to do the opposite of what Luther teaches, right? Our side is good, the other side is bad. The other side is maybe stupid, or uninformed, or stubborn, or bad people, or influenced by the devil. That's where Luther went very often. And so we tend to put the worst construction on everything. When we meet someone who is the other, whatever that other is, religion, color, creed, musical preference, and especially politics, we assume the worst about those people very often. Now, politicians do this all the time, and they will not stop, right? They do this to get elected. And so when you're running for office, you want to depict the other party and the other candidate as dangerous, as bad, as morally corrupt. Just look at how we do this all the time. Now, I'm not saying there aren't morally corrupt politicians. We all know there are. But we automatically go there very quickly. Our politicians very often do that because they want to throw out that red meat and get people excited and get them out to the polls. And so politicians do this. They're going to keep doing it. We can recognize it, but that's probably not going to change. The other folks who do this all the time and aren't going to change, news outlets, right? Whether this be what you watch on TV, cable, if you follow the news online, blogs, whatever, right? Wherever you look for your news outlets are doing this all the time. And why do they put out the best or the worst construction on what others are doing? Because they want your business. They want you to, to click that button. They want you to get to their channel. They want you to get to their website. And so they're going to say things that aren't really true or are often misleading or half-truths to get your business, to get you to go there. And the other side of this with news outlets is that news outlets are what? We all know this. They're becoming the propaganda wing for the various parties that they support, the various political perspectives that they support. And we see this all the time, that they've become these propaganda wings. And on both sides, because I know you are all sitting there going, yeah, those people over there, they do that. Their news outlets, total propaganda. We see this on both sides. And it's newspapers, and it's cable news, and it's everything. Right? These have become propaganda wings for political parties, and they're not going to change. And so they push us into our own little isolated, holier than thou echo chambers, right? We go to them because they make us feel good about our opinions, and then we end up in an echo chamber feeling better. And if you're not with us, then you're against us, and you're the other tribe, and the other tribe is bad, because that's how we're programmed to think. Now, if you look at the rhetoric regarding the rhetoric that we're using these days regarding those who disagree with us about the best way to handle the COVID virus, and let's be honest, that's not an easy one to figure out. But the rhetoric that we use for people who disagree with on this, it's really kind of unfortunate. And if you look at how we struggle to address the very difficult issues of race relations in the United States that we're dealing with right now, those are really tricky matters, and there's people of intelligence and goodwill who disagree. But look at the rhetoric that we have. Look at people's Facebook posts and all those other Insta snaps or whatever that kids are using these days. We use a rhetoric that is just designed to tear down anyone who disagrees with us. And so we are becoming part of this as well. We're not going to change the politicians. We're not going to change the news outlets. At least I don't think so. But we can change ourselves. So how do you and I put the best construction on everything? How do we follow Luther's advice? And again, Luther isn't saying, this is my advice, right? He's saying, this is what God's commandment means. This is what, if you are trying to follow the 10 commandments and you're trying to, not bear false witness against your neighbor, he's saying, this is what God expects of you. So that's a pretty heavy weight. So take that seriously. So how do we do that? Let me suggest 4 things that we can do to help us put the best construction on everything when we're interacting with people, especially those other people. 1, recognize that we've got the tendency to do this, right? We've got the tendency to do just the opposite of this, right? We have the tendency, I would argue, the genetic tendency to put the worst construction on other tribes, on other groups. So recognize this tendency that you have within yourself. 2, recognize how others around us are encouraging us to do this. I mean, we talk about politicians, we talk about the media, but most of our friends and family are doing this as well, just like we're doing it. So recognize where this is going on. 3, I think, is the most challenging one. You got to expose yourself to the best representation of the other, right? You've got to expose yourself to members of other groups, and not just the caricatures of their worst elements, because this is what we always have. There's that other tribe over there, and we find the worst elements in that tribe, and then we caricature them, and that's what they're like. But go out and interact with people. If you're a Democrat, go find a Republican to talk with. If you're a Republican, go find a Democrat. If you find yourself thinking differently about any of these other issues, just go and talk to people. And don't enter into it like a debate. I always want to enter in things like a debate and win, and that's not a good thing to do many times. But just go and listen so you understand. You don't have to agree, but just understand where that person's coming from. And even if you do disagree, you'll probably find out, well, okay, I understand why they reached that conclusion or why they do what they do. And we're different, right? But I can still, recognize the humanity in the other person. And that brings us to number 4. How do you work to put the best construction on everything? Just do it. You don't need to be a brain surgeon to figure it out. Do it. As you're going through your life and you're interacting with people and you're encountering situations, put the best construction on everything, right? You're going to disagree with people, but you can disagree with people and recognize that they might still have a good argument. Maybe you disagree because you think, well, maybe they just don't know X. And maybe you disagree and you think, maybe they've got an argument that I haven't considered that I should at least listen to. But you don't even have to like the people. But if we can come to the point where we recognize that they're still people, flawed like any of us, then we can, put the best construction on the things that we don't like about them, right? And recognize their humanity. Our actions become our habits, right? So make a conscious effort to put the best construction on everything. And when you see folks that you instinctively want to disparage, which we all do from time to time, try hard to see their humanity, and try hard to see their intelligence, and try hard to see their goodness. And that's it.